Does your company name have a degree of intrigue? Is it memorable? Does it have an impact? What's in a name? We're going to talk about that very thing today on the Peter McClelland Show. We start now.
Live from the Twin Cities, it's the Peter McClelland Show. Peter McClelland, CHFC, is the president of the 401k Latte Company. Peter has helped his financial planning clients for more than 20 years with advice about their money, their families, and their life goals. Find out more online at 401klatte.com. Invest in a conversation now. Here's Peter McClelland.
And welcome to the Peter McClelland Show. This is your host, Peter McClelland. Thank you for listening. Always want to say thanks for listening. I really mean that. Thank you for listening in. Today, this is a really interesting topic. It's one that I have personally wrestled with for years. And I can tell you that there is something about having a name that is fitting, a name that is memorable, a name that has impact. And we welcome to the show today Devin Thomas Treadwell and John Stucker. Guys, welcome to the Peter McClelland Show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Great to have you here. So tell us, you guys obviously think something's important about a name. You're with the company that you call Polywog, and people might say, "What? What is that?" They're going to remember. Are you the frog company? They're going to remember it though, right? I mean, that's
right.
Obviously why you did it.
Right.
Tell us why Polywog. Describe that if you would.
Yeah, there were a couple of reasons actually why we chose that name for our company. One of the reasons really was that we wanted to have a connection with what our brand is really about. And what we do, we specialize in brand creation. So we work with brands in their formative stages.
A polywog is forming into a
exactly
frog or
a formative stage of a frog. Exactly. Okay. And beyond that, we wanted to have something that had a tonality that was different from our competitors. It's very important for anyone, really, for their name to be unique enough that it stands out from their competitors. And in our industry, there were kind of two kinds of names. The very serious founder names, like Carmichael Lynch or Camel Methune. Those are some big ones. And then sort of the other vein of names that's a little bit more recent is really cool-sounding names, like Fuel and Black Rocket. And so in order to have a tonality that was different, we went with something that is very approachable, almost whimsical even, in the Polywog name, but something that connects with people and has a really strong human touch to it.
What does it mean to a business to have a name that is all of the above, fitting, has impact, is memorable, kind of describes to some extent, or maybe has a bit of intrigue, a bit of mystique to it?
Sure.
What does that mean to a company?
Well, it really gives a business an edge. And in many ways can help a business compete with a competitor that has a much larger budget. When you have a name that has impact and memorability, you don't have to keep repeating it in marketing materials to for people to remember it. I'll give you an example. We have a former client we named, she has a marketing and public relations firm, which we branded for her and called it Sweet Spot. She was attending a mini master's with about 30 other people. At the beginning of the class, the professor went around, had everybody introduce themselves and say what company they were from. And then later in the class, he looks up and he goes, "Now, I don't remember where all of you were from except for General Mills, Best Buy, and Sweet Spot."
Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So right up there, I mean, with the big dogs.
Exactly.
Just because they have a good name.
Yep.
I like that. That sticks out. It is. It's a great idea, Sweet Spot. I mean, that just fits.
Yeah.
That's what we all want, right? We all want to have a sweet spot. So you're doing this not only for the public or for, businesses, small businesses or large businesses for that matter, but you're also doing this for other firms that do somewhat of what you do. Is that kind of a fair statement?
Yeah, to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we work directly with clients, but we also work for other agencies that don't have a really strong naming specialization in-house.
Okay. Wow. So if they don't, they can call you and say, let's get those name guys in, the polywogs, and get some good names for these
Exactly.
clients. Nice. Wow, that's great. So what's your background? How did you stumble onto this thing of being polywogs and being the ones that help create in this whole creative thing of the name and what it
Right.
means? How did that happen?
Well, John and I have been working together for over 15 years now. We both have a background in traditional marketing and advertising. I came out of some very large advertising agencies here and in Chicago on the West Coast, and John came out of a design agency background, and we ended up at the same agency, and throughout our careers had worked on naming projects. And when we found ourselves independent, we put our heads together and said, we can make the most positive impact on a business if we get in on the brand creation end of things rather than working with brands after they've already been created. And we also recognized that there was a strong need for a better naming process. The typical way of doing things where you throw everybody in a room together and everybody tosses out ideas and then you hope to have something usable at the end of the session really isn't working very well anymore because the landscape has changed. The trademark situation is really, really hard now for any brand to find availability. In fact, it has been called the number one marketing problem today is the availability of trademarks. And so we recognized that there was this growing need for a better naming process and better, stronger, more powerful names. And so we developed a new methodology, and our attorneys informed us that it was unlike anything else out there, and so we were able to apply for a patent on it, and we have the world's first patent-pending methodology for brand creation.
Nice. Wow, to have it patent, not just the name is patent, but your process?
Exactly.
Wow. Interesting. So there's some intellectual property worth protecting.
You bet.
So you've done that right up front. You've gotten the
Yes.
attorneys involved.
Yep.
And good. No one's gonna steal it.
Right.
Or they're gonna have a hard time if they do.
Exactly.
So that's great. Wow. So why is it what when you say the landscape has changed? Is it just that all the good names are taken, or what's changed?
Well, there's just been such an explosion of new products over the last 20 years. And every one of those new products needs a name. And most often, those names get trademarked. And so in just about every trademark class, there are many, many, many names that are already taken. Devin, what are the figures on the total number of trademarks today?
As of 2010, there were 1.6 million active trademarks in the U.S., and then there's several million more in the rest of the world.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot of names.
But there's a lot of words in the English language, so I would think if you can combine them, or I don't know. I'm just thinking there's no lack of opportunity for the creative mind.
Correct.
Exactly.
Correct. And that's the trick because, the obvious names are taken first.
Yeah.
And so you have to go beyond the obvious and make connections to a brand promise in a really unexpected way.
Wow. Well, I can attest to it, and we could bring up my. I thought I had a great idea with this term, cabinosity. We wrote a book of short stories a number of years ago. Kelly Shackman and I did, and great cover. And Joe Beard, I'll give him a plug. He did the artwork here. It's nicely done. The cabin being ripped apart, that tug of war going on. And found people were buying the book, but were sadly disappointed because they thought the whole thing was about cabin conflict and cabin resolution, and it wasn't. So it's like, oh no, we didn't do this right. So now it's inheritance tug of war stories. We're doing the commercial for that too. That's gonna be. Did we do that yet? No, maybe not. We did. Yeah, we did. That's running. All right, good. So I forget even because I don't listen to my show as much as I should. Anyway, but I can tell you, those of you out there that are wrestling with this, I don't know what it costs to hire you guys, but I have a sneaking suspicion it was a lot less expensive than doing this and then having to redo this.
Yeah.
I'm holding the books if you can't see us in Radio Land, but the cover of the old book and the cover of the new book. And yes, get it done right the first time.
Exactly.
Think it through. I would think even if you like this, somebody what you guys do would say, well, wait a minute, is it all about cabins? Right? So that would have been, that question would have been raised.
Right.
And, unfortunately, we found out the hard way.
Yeah, we always start with strategy up front, with what we call a positioning document, where you outline, what is the brand promise, what is the, what makes this different, and what are reasons why people should believe that, and nail down some personality traits so that we have a blueprint moving forward and everybody agrees what messages should be delivered before any name generation is even done.
Okay. So that might be protect you if you come up with a really, really cool name or great name, but it's outside of the sphere of that blueprint, it doesn't fit.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Wow. That's good, because I would think it's a huge mistake if it doesn't fit that blueprint. The idea of having strategy up front is so vital. I like this. This is getting down to the basics of what works. That's good. So what are the biggest things you think about when you create a brand?
Well, like Devin was just mentioning, we really think about what is it that the business needs to say.
Is that encompassed in that blueprint? Then?
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. And, ideally what we want to do is get to what is the one completely unique offering that the business has, the encompassing, unique offering that differentiates them from the competition, and that allows us to get to a place with the name that is unique from the competition as well.
Okay. And I would think this is the type of thing that, I don't know how you get it going, how it starts, but let me ask you, when you're dealing with this and you have a team of people from a company, let's say there's a number of people that are going to be the ultimate decision makers, do you ever see conflict?
Absolutely.
One loving a name, other one hating the other one and loving the other one? And
Yeah, absolutely. And even before we get to naming, we often see a lot of conflict. And it's amazing how enlightening the process of positioning tends to be for business owners. And they find out that they have different perspectives on what the business is, and what their real promise is, and that those are some of the things that we get to. Yep. We ask them about their vision too, where they want to take the company in the future.
So that's got to be unified, clarified.
Yep.
So, well, you are listening to the Peter McClelland Show on Business 1570, Twin Cities Business Radio, and we are talking about names and how powerful a name is. And we are really privileged today to be speaking, because a lot of companies struggle with this, with Polywog, John Stucker and Devin Thomas Treadwell. Guys, we have a few seconds left. How can people get a hold of you if they want to say, maybe we should be talking to you about getting this brand name thing going?
We are very easy to find. Polywog, Pollywog. If you Google Polywog and branding, we'll come right up to the top of the page. Or you can go to Polywog Inc., PollywogInc.com.
Wonderful. And so worthwhile. Because for years I suffered with it. I stumbled into what we're doing, and I like the name we have, but there's a lot of companies that don't. And I tell you, if I'd have met you earlier, I'd have said, where do I sign? Just get me a name. When we come back, we'll continue with Polywog. Stay tuned after the news.
This is the Peter McClelland Show on Business 1570.
Welcome back to the Peter McClelland Show, and today we're talking about names. What's in a name? I don't mean naming your first child or your second born. I'm talking about, well, in some cases it is. When you have a business, that business is your baby. You want to give it a name that is going to be fitting, impactful, memorable, something that is going to have, as Devin has said, a bit of mystique. And we are joined today with Polywog, Devin Thomas Treadwell and John Stucker, who are involved in this process, and they have it patented. They have it, it's down. They have it going. And I think this is a great thing, because not only have you patented your name, but you have a process that helps companies.
Right.
That really goes to the heart of what they do. So now I imagine, like we talked at the break, there's lots of companies out there that, well, they've already done their branding. They did that years ago. And is it something they should consider, maybe a rebranding? Is it time for that? How do you know when it's time to rebrand or to relaunch that whole thing? How do you know?
Well, sometimes entrepreneurs especially are in a rush to get to market, and they don't put as much time and thought into naming as the brand really deserves. It's an asset that you're going to have over the life of the brand, so it's really important to get it right from the start. One example of a company that launched with a weak name, it was a company called SimulScribe. And this is a service that would take your voicemail, transcribe it to text, and then send it to you as email. Great idea for a company. But they launched with this very weak name, hard to say, not sure how to spell it.
Yeah.
It just didn't travel well by word of mouth. And so the founder looked up and said, we need a better name. They renamed it to Phone Tag. And within 6 months, they tripled their referrals from word of mouth. And the entrepreneur is quoted as saying that he believes the company would be 3 times the size if they launched with that name from the very beginning.
Wow.
So it could be that your business is just limping along because you're not, your name is not very strong. But we also have some other really distinctive signs that you may need to rebrand. And one of the first ones is if you don't own the trademark on your name. That's like owning a house that doesn't have a clear title.
Oh, not good.
Really not good.
You're asking for trouble.
Absolutely. So, and it's surprising how many small businesses don't trademark their name. And if you don't do the due diligence around your name and the trademark, you could be infringing on somebody else's trademark, which could lead to trouble, legal expenses down the road for you.
Yep.
Or you could find someone else using your name after you've already been in business, and you still have some legal rights to fight for that name, but now you're going to be spending money on it. So that's one of the big signs.
I think that's vital. And wow. So how do you know if it's time to redo it? What would come to mind? I mean, obviously limping along could be one sign. Yeah, it's time to do something different. How do you know that what's needed is the rebranding?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a couple other factors that indicate that you might do well by rebranding.
Okay.
And one of them is if your brand name doesn't relate to your brand promise. If the name doesn't connect with something that is a little different from your competition and is about what you offer to customers. And now we're not really talking about a descriptive name that says exactly what you do or exactly what you are, because those frequently don't capture the imagination. But we're looking for something that is interesting, is intriguing, but also connects in a unique way to what is important about your company to your customers.
And that brings in the element of the mystique a little bit.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have said, and I'm not patting myself on the back, but when I wear a logo, you can see it there. There's the 2 cups with the steam coming up, and there's the faces having a conversation. And our tagline is invest in a conversation. I've had people say 401k latte, coffee shop, what do you got, or retirement, what do you got going on? They ask me the question. It gives me a platform to
Absolutely.
say, so I don't know what your logo is, but do people, I imagine they would say, whoa, what do you got going?
Absolutely.
That is a really good sign. If you, on your name badge, if you go to a conference and nobody asks you what you do, that's not, that's not a good sign. You want that conversation to start because your brand name intrigues people.
Well, mine, I think it can intrigue them and almost to the point of irritating them. Twice I've heard someone say, all right, what the hell is the 401k latte company? And I'm like, don't get mad at me. I didn't mean,
right.
So it's, but seriously, I think that's there has to be that intrigue. So you're saying, I guess if your name doesn't say anything that someone wouldn't ask a question, you want it to ask a question to some extent, or at least provoke some conversation.
Yes, and when you answer that question, you want to be sure that your name, connects back to a promise.
Right.
You don't want a name that's so intriguing. You want a name that's intriguing but also relevant.
Right.
A name that's mysterious and irrelevant is not what you want.
And irrelevant, yeah. Oh, not good. Wow. So I imagine if you're talking to a group of people here today, let's say that are thinking, do we rebrand? And let's say there's a number of people in the company, this is where you could have I would imagine, some opportunity for conflict resolution.
Oh, sure.
Right? I mean, realistically, some are going to say, no, I like what we have. And others are going to say, no, we need something new, something fresh, something that speaks to fill in the blank.
Right.
Wow. So how does that initial meeting go with people? What do you do in that first, if people are kind of checking you out, wondering, do we hire these folks to really take us to a new level? Are they going to be able to deliver on that? What's that look like?
Well, most often, if you get to that meeting, they've already made the decision that they need a new name. If they're just toying around with the idea, they're probably not going to take the time for the meeting. But so usually when we're talking to people, they're pretty sure that they need a new name. And then it's just a matter of talking to them about how we approach it and helping them see the power in the way that we approach it and the way that we evaluate names to make sure that we give only name options that are going to do something positive for their business.
Well, when I was doing, playing with the idea of the 401k latte name, I gave it out to a number of people. What do you think of this? People that I trusted that I thought, and just honest opinion, what do you think? And even some clients. And so do people get to do that if you give them a name or two? Or do they have a period of time where they can kind of play with it and let it sit?
Yes.
Kind of digest it a little bit and say, all right, what does this feel like?
Yeah, actually, we kind of help get that process really rolling by walking our clients through an evaluation that we do on each one of the name options.
Right.
So every name that we consider, we run it through an evaluation of 17 different characteristics that contribute to the power of a name. And
why 17?
Well, it's kind of a funny number. Yeah, it helps that it's a unique number.
Okay.
It helps people remember it. But it happened to be that in breaking down, when we started working on our process, breaking down exactly what it was that made names impactful and memorable and connected to a brand promise, we found 17 different aspects that affect how strong a name is. Okay. And they actually fall into 3 different categories. The first is just name strength. And in that, we're just talking about the power of the word or words themselves, how much stopping power they have, how much emotional trigger they have, things like that. The next category is brand fit. And so that's characteristics that are all about how does it connect with what your company is about, what your product is about. And then finally, extremely importantly, of course, is ownability. And that looks at how available is this name to own by trademarking, but also to own as share of mind in your customers' heads.
Okay. And I would think that's a big issue because you could have a great idea and if it's already owned.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there something to be said for a name that might be, could you trademark a name if it's a totally different product, different service?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has 40 some different classes of trademarks. And many of those are different product categories.
Okay.
They also have 5 or 6 different service categories. So fortunately, you're not going up against, toothpaste when you're trying to trademark a insurance company.
Oh, okay.
It's divided by industry.
I was wondering about, the whole term for Apple, and there was the Beatles record label, Apple Records, so I know there was a stink about that.
Yes.
I don't know how it all settled out. I don't really care, but I would think there's some opportunity for, I would think if it's a totally different industry,
Right.
I would think the patent would say, yeah, you don't need to worry about this, right? I would think.
That's true. Although when brands get as big as Apple, they own that word as share of mind.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't recommend to anyone to name something Apple.
No.
We wouldn't recommend that someone name something Crest or Target or Mustang.
Yeah.
Because those all conjure up thoughts of specific brands that have been around for a long time that people are very familiar with.
Okay. Before the show, you were talking about how sometimes a brand name may have worked years ago. What causes it to get to a place where it's just not working like it did? What happens?
Well, it's really the environment. the brand glut that we're experiencing is a lot of it. And often, names are developed at a time when a company is at a certain point in their life cycle, and it's appropriate for them then. But, companies and businesses go through transitions, and sometimes they get to a point where they just need to, change the name to reflect where they are now.
Mm. And what about when you put a .com at the end of it? How important is it to get that right? I would think it's huge, but...
Surprisingly, it's much less important than it used to be.
Really?
Yeah, and that really has to do with the way that people navigate around the web these days. It's changed a lot from the days when you would just go in and enter a web address in your browser in the web address window. Actually, the way people get to most sites on the web these days is through a search engine.
Right.
Whether you're using Google or Yahoo, even if it's a brand that they know, they will often type it into Google and type in the industry,
yep,
so that they're sure to get to the right website.
Okay.
It's really, too risky, and you usually end up wasting time to try and guess at what the URL of a business is.
I'm forever using that. It's just kind of one of those. It must be an intuitive thing, because no one ever, I don't think, ever sat down and said to me, just Google it. But they did. That's
sure.
Come the term.
Yep, right. Yep.
Just Xerox it. So anyway, let's say, how about, well, we're running a little low on time. How do you know if a name is weak?
Well, we would look at it through the lens of our 17 characteristics.
Okay.
Those are as a whole proprietary, but we can share 5 of them with you today if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay. One of the most important characteristics of a name that gives it power is instant meaning. And basically what this means is this word or phrase that you've named around in the vocabulary of your target audience? Are there connections that it makes instantly, or is it completely
obscure?
Obscure, exactly. An example of this would be a couple of SUVs, the Porsche Cayenne and the Touareg. Do you know what a Touareg is?
No.
Okay.
No.
The Touareg is that.
I can picture. I've seen the it's an SUV though.
Yes,
right?
the vehicle.
Volkswagen. Is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Touareg is actually named. It was named after a nomadic tribe in Africa. It's a real thing,
no. Wow.
but it's such an obscure reference that most people don't know it. Cayenne, on the other hand, everyone knows what a cayenne pepper is.
Yeah.
And it conjures up these instant connections.
Yeah.
Exactly. Heat, excitement. It's spicy. It's fun.
So you can waste a lot of Farfenugans if you're not careful.
Right. Exactly.
All right. Well, you are listening to the Peter McClelland Show on Business 1570, Twin Cities Business Radio. We're speaking with Polywog. Are you happy with your name? If you're not, it's worth getting it done right, or going back to the drawing board with people that know what they're doing. Give these guys a call. How do you reach you? Polywog.com, right?
Polywog.com. Polywog, Inc.
Inc.com.
Or if you want to Google us, you could Google Polywog and naming or Polywog and branding. It will pop up right to the top.
We're back after the break.
This is the Peter McClelland Show on Business 1570.
And welcome back to the Peter McClelland Show. We are privileged today to be speaking with Polywog, like the frog, and in its creative state of becoming a frog. And Devin, we were talking about some of these proprietary traits. You already talked about the first one. You used the example of the Volkswagen name that I don't remember how to even say it.
Touareg.
Touareg. Okay, whatever it is. Probably not the best idea. Give us some other ideas about your criteria.
Okay, one of the important traits in a name is to have a concrete image. And that basically is because when you can envision something in a name, your brain actually stores it in 2 different ways. It stores it visually and it stores it as a word. So a concrete image, for example, Monster, the job database, versus Career Builder. Career Builder is very abstract. Monster, you can picture a monster. So that would be a stronger name than Career Builder.
Interesting.
Another element we look for is what we call human element. And that is when a name has warmth, when it has a human aspect to it. And a good example of that we can give you if you look at smartphone models, the BlackBerry, for example, versus the Evo. The BlackBerry, everybody, even prior to the PDAs had experience with real blackberries. We know what they are. We've eaten them. We've touched them. They're very familiar. They're something that we've had a close experience with.
Right.
Whereas Evo, on the other hand, it's 3 initials. Don't know what it stands for.
Evil? Is it? I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like evil, which is another problem.
Right.
But at best, it comes off as something abstract, and therefore it doesn't have any warmth to it. And warmth is a really important thing. That's what we look at in human element.
Okay.
Another trait is what we call trigger. Trigger is the ability of a name to elicit an emotion, and that emotion can be anything from a chuckle. It can be intrigue. It can be a little bit of anger. Even it can be it can even be a negative emotion, as long as you get some kind of emotion. For example, take these 2 airline names, Virgin and United. Virgin is a very triggery name. It conjures up a lot of things that businesses would be very scared of, and yet it's a name you remember because of that reaction. Yeah. United, very safe, and if they didn't have the history and the longevity and the huge advertising budget, not a name that you would likely remember.
Interesting. You're right. Yeah. Wow. These are great criteria. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And so you have 17 of these things that are proprietary. We won't ask you to divulge them. Are you done with the 5? Did we get?
There's actually one more.
Go
yeah.
What is it?
Jumping into another category. This is a brand fit trait, and one of the things that we're looking for is a differentiated brand promise connection in the name. And if you're familiar with the Wii gaming console,
sure, yeah.
Wii came out with a very different brand promise. It was all about groups of people playing together, as opposed to the lone gamer.
Yeah.
So they used the name Wii, as opposed to PlayStation, which is a very generic name.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, this is intriguing. I like it. Well, that's what you guys do, is intrigue and create names. And I would encourage anyone out there that's wrestling with this, don't wrestle with it. Call these guys. Go visit them on the web, pollywoginc.com, right?
Right.
That's right.
And it's been an absolute joy to have you here today. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Good
Thanks
stuff.
for having us.
Well, you're helping businesses. Thank you. And that's what we do on the Peter McClelland Show. We want to promote business. So go get a good name, get a good brand. What would you say, Angus? Well, I'd say thank God.
You've been listening to the Peter McClelland Show. Peter McClelland, CHFC, is the president of the 401k Latte Company. To reach Peter, call 952-882-0400 or on the web at 401klatte.com. This program is sponsored by the 401k Latte Company. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Genius Wealth Management Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. For more information, go to www.401klatte.com or call 952-882-0400.